The December rain against the drawing-room windows matched the chill in Amelia's chest as she poured tea for her mother-in-law. 3 weeks. She had been the Duchess of Ashford for 3 weeks, and already she wondered how many more she could endure. "More tea, Lady Pemberton?" Amelia asked, her voice steady despite the weight of 3 pairs of eyes examining her like a curiosity in a museum. "How kind," Lady Pemberton replied, though her smile did not reach her eyes. "Tell me, Your Grace, are you finding married life agreeable?" The title still felt foreign on Amelia's lips, borrowed rather than earned. "It has its adjustments, naturally." "Naturally." Lady Cordelia Ashford, Sebastian's mother, set down her cup with deliberate precision. "Though one imagines the circumstances of your marriage required rather more adjustment than most." Amelia's fingers tightened imperceptibly on the teapot handle. There it was, the barb wrapped in silk, the reminder that everyone in London knew exactly how Miss Amelia Hartwell had become the Duchess of Ashford. A scandal, a compromise, a transaction. "Every marriage is unique, Lady Ashford," Amelia replied evenly. Mrs. Clark, the third guest, leaned forward with false sympathy. "Of course, dear, and we must admire your resilience. Not every young woman could hold her head high after such unfortunate circumstances." The door opened before Amelia could respond. Sebastian entered, immaculate as always in dark grey, his expression one of polite disinterest. He was a handsome man. She had noticed that even in the solicitor's office where he had first proposed this arrangement. Dark hair, grey eyes that revealed nothing, a jaw that might have been carved from marble. "Mother," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Ladies." His gaze passed over Amelia as if she was simply another piece of furniture. "I trust you are well entertained." "Your wife is a gracious hostess," Lady Pemberton said, the emphasis on wife carrying just enough irony to sting. "Indeed." Sebastian moved to the sideboard, pouring himself brandy, though it was barely past 3. "Mother, do remind the staff this arrangement is temporary in nature. I found my usual bedchamber disturbed this morning." The words were casual, almost careless, but they landed on Amelia like blows. Lady Cordelia's expression shifted to something resembling satisfaction. "Of course, darling. One must maintain proper boundaries." "Quite." Sebastian finished his drink in one swallow and set down the glass. "If you will excuse me, I have correspondence to attend to." He left without another glance in Amelia's direction. The silence that followed was excruciating. "Well," Mrs. Clark said brightly, "how refreshingly modern. A marriage of understanding rather than those messy emotional entanglements." "Yes," Lady Pemberton agreed. "So much more civilized." Amelia smiled, though she felt as if she were shattering inside. "More tea, ladies?" They departed an hour later, leaving behind their poison wrapped in pleasantries. Lady Cordelia remained, watching Amelia direct the servants to clear the tea service. "You played your role adequately," the older woman said finally. Amelia turned to face her. "I was not aware I was playing a role, Lady Ashford." "Were you not?" Lady Cordelia rose, smoothing her skirts. "Come now, Miss Hartwell. Oh, forgive me, Your Grace. Though we both know the title means nothing. My son married you to silence gossip and satisfy his grandmother's will. You accepted to salvage what remained of your family's reputation. Let us not pretend this is anything more than a mutually beneficial arrangement." "I have pretended nothing," Amelia replied quietly. "Good. Then you understand your place. Sebastian will tire of this charade eventually, and when he does, I expect you to accept whatever settlement he offers with grace. Do try not to become attached in the meantime. It will only make things more difficult." Lady Cordelia swept from the room, leaving Amelia alone with the fading afternoon light and the bitter taste of her new reality. That evening, unable to sleep, Amelia sought refuge in the library. She had discovered it her second day in the house, a vast room of leather-bound books and old wood that smelled of paper and possibility. Here, at least, she could pretend she was simply a woman who enjoyed reading, not a duchess purchased to satisfy propriety. She had just settled into a chair by the fire when the door opened. Sebastian stood in the doorway, clearly surprised to find her there. "I apologize. I did not realize anyone was here." "The house is yours, Your Grace. I am merely a guest." The words came out sharper than she intended. His expression flickered, something that might have been discomfort. "You are my wife. This is your home as well." "Is it?" Amelia set down her book, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since their wedding. "Your mother seems to think otherwise." Sebastian entered the room, closing the door behind him. "My mother has strong opinions. You must not take them to heart." "And what of your opinions, Your Grace? This afternoon you told her to remind the staff that this arrangement is temporary." She kept her voice level, proud that it did not shake. "Why did you say that?" He moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. The firelight cast his profile in sharp relief. "Because it is what we agreed upon. This marriage is fake, Amelia. Surely you have not forgotten." The name, her given name rather than a title, should have felt intimate. Instead, it felt like a dismissal. "I have not forgotten anything, Your Grace," she replied. "But there is a difference between a private arrangement and public humiliation. When you speak of our marriage as temporary within your mother's hearing, you give her license to treat me as something less than human. She, in turn, gives that license to all of London." Sebastian turned, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or even shame. But it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "You are right," he said finally. "That was thoughtless of me. I will be more discreet in the future." "Discreet," Amelia repeated softly. "Yes, I suppose that is all one can ask." "What else would you have me say?" There was an edge to his voice now, something almost defensive. "We entered this arrangement with clear understanding. You needed respectability. I needed a wife to satisfy my grandmother's demands and silence the gossips. It is a transaction, nothing more. And yet transactions can be conducted with dignity," Amelia said. "I do not ask you to pretend affection, Your Grace. I ask only that you not actively remind the world, and me, that I am an inconvenience you tolerate." The silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Sebastian's jaw worked as if he were fighting some internal battle. "I will be more careful," he said at last. "That is all I can offer." He left without waiting for her response, the door closing with a soft click that somehow felt final. Amelia sat alone in the library, the fire crackling its indifferent warmth. She had known what she was agreeing to when she accepted Sebastian's proposal. Her reputation had been destroyed by a scandal not of her making. Trapped alone with Lord Pemberton's younger brother in a library during a ball, compromised beyond redemption through no fault of her own. Her family, genteel but not wealthy, could not protect her from the consequences. She had faced a future of whispers, closed doors, and slow social death. Sebastian had offered salvation. A marriage that would restore her reputation and allow her family to hold their heads high once more. In return, she would be his duchess in name only. Separate bedchambers, separate lives, a marriage that existed only for the eyes of society. She had accepted gratefully, believing she understood the cost. But she had not anticipated this. The daily reminders of her unworthiness, the casual cruelty of being married to a man who looked through her as if she were glass. the slow, aching loneliness of living in a house full of servants, but utterly alone. Amelia pressed her fingers to her eyes, willing herself not to cry. She had survived the scandal that destroyed her reputation. She would survive this marriage that was no marriage at all. She would endure, as she always had, with dignity and grace. But tonight, in the library where no one could see, she allowed herself the weakness of tears. She could not have known that across the house, in his own chambers, the Duke of Ashford sat awake in the darkness, her words echoing in his mind like an accusation he could not answer. 4 days passed before Amelia saw Sebastian again beyond brief encounters in hallways. She developed a routine: breakfast alone in her room, mornings in the library, afternoons managing the household accounts that Lady Cordelia had grudgingly relinquished. She was determined to make herself useful, if nothing else. On the 5th morning, she sought refuge in the conservatory. The glass-enclosed room was warm despite the December chill outside, filled with winter-blooming plants that perfumed the air with unexpected sweetness. She settled on a bench near the windows, a letter from her father in her hands. His words were kind but worried. He asked if she was happy, if the Duke treated her well, if she needed anything. Amelia had responded with careful lies. Yes, she was adjusting. Yes, Sebastian was courteous. No, she wanted for nothing material. She folded the letter slowly, blinking against the burn in her eyes. "Good morning." Amelia startled, turning to find Sebastian in the doorway. He wore riding clothes, his dark hair slightly dishevelled in a way that made him look younger, more approachable. "Your Grace," she said, rising automatically. "Please sit." He moved into the room, his expression uncertain. "I did not mean to intrude. I often come here after riding. The quiet is—" He trailed off, as if unsure how to finish. "Pleasant," Amelia supplied. "Yes, I have discovered that as well." Sebastian nodded, then seemed to notice her hands. "Is something wrong? You seem distressed." The question surprised her, genuine concern rather than polite inquiry. "My father worries. I assured him all is well." "Is it?" The words were soft, almost hesitant. Amelia looked at him directly. "I am lonely, Your Grace, but I do not regret my choice. My family's reputation has been restored. That was the bargain, and I am grateful." Something shifted in Sebastian's expression. Discomfort, perhaps, or guilt. He sat on the bench opposite her, elbows on his knees. "I have not been a good husband to you." "You have been exactly the husband we agreed you would be," Amelia replied quietly. "That does not make it right." He rubbed his face tiredly. "My grandmother's will required that I marry within the year or forfeit my inheritance. Not my title, but the estates, the funds, everything that makes the dukedom more than an empty name. When your scandal broke and I needed a solution quickly, you seemed convenient." Amelia finished. "Available," Sebastian corrected. "But I realize now that I have treated this arrangement, treated you, with less consideration than I would show a business associate. For that I apologize." Amelia studied him, this man who was her husband and yet a stranger. "May I ask you something, Your Grace?" "Sebastian," he said, "when we are private, at least. It seems absurd to stand on formality under these circumstances." "Very well. Sebastian." The name felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way that frightened her. "Why do you remind yourself constantly that this marriage is fake? Is it for my benefit or yours?" He stiffened, then gave a short, humorless laugh. "You are perceptive. That is not an answer." "No," he agreed. He was silent for a long moment, staring at his hands. "There was someone. Before. A woman I believed I loved. who claimed to love me in return. But she loved the title, not the man. When I discovered her in another man's arms 2 weeks before our wedding, she told me quite plainly that she had never wanted me. Only the privilege of being a duchess. He looked up, meeting Amelia's eyes. So yes, I remind myself this marriage is fake because I cannot afford to forget it. Not again. Understanding settled in Amelia's chest, painful in its clarity. I am sorry. That must have been devastating. It was educational, Sebastian said flatly. Then his expression softened slightly. But you are not her. No, Amelia agreed. I am simply the woman convenient enough to marry and useful enough to keep. That is not... Sebastian stopped, frustration crossing his features. I do not think of you that way. Do you think of me at all? The question hung between them. Too honest, too raw. Sebastian opened his mouth, closed it again. Finally he said, more than I expected to, more than I intended. Something in Amelia's chest tightened, hope, dangerous and unwanted. Before she could respond, Sebastian stood abruptly. I have imposed on your solitude long enough, but perhaps, would you join me for breakfast tomorrow? In the morning room, not your chambers. It would appear more convincing to the staff if we occasionally took meals together. Amelia recognized the excuse for what it was, a shield, a way to reach toward connection while maintaining distance. She should refuse, protect herself from the slow torture of proximity without intimacy. Instead, she heard herself say, I would like that. Sebastian nodded, something that might have been relief flickering across his face. Tomorrow, then, 8 o'clock. He left quickly, as if afraid he might change his mind. Amelia sat alone among the winter flowers, her father's letter forgotten in her lap, and wondered if she had just made a terrible mistake. The days that followed developed a tentative rhythm. Breakfast together, conversation that was careful but no longer cold. Sebastian asked about her reading. She inquired about his parliamentary work. They spoke of safe things, the weather, the household, books they had both read. But beneath the surface, something was shifting, like ice beginning to crack in spring. Then came the dinner party. Lady Cordelia had insisted on hosting a formal dinner, inviting 24 members of the Haute Ton to Ashford House. We must establish your place in society, she had informed Amelia with cold practicality. People must see that the Duke's marriage, however unusual its origins, is respectable. Amelia had prepared carefully, wearing a gown of deep blue silk that had cost more than her father earned in a month. She had styled her hair herself, having dismissed the maid. She needed a few moments alone before facing the lions. The dinner was torture from the first course. Lord Pemberton, whose brother had been the instrument of her downfall, watched her with speculation that made her skin crawl. Lady Thornton, a notorious gossip, peppered her with questions designed to embarrass. Even the sympathetic glances from a few guests felt like pity she did not want. Tell me, Your Grace, Mrs. Clark said as footmen served the fish course. How did you and the Duke court? The engagement was so... sudden. We met at a most opportune time, Amelia replied evenly. The Duke was seeking a wife. I was seeking security. It seemed a logical match. The table went silent. Lady Cordelia's face tightened with disapproval at such bluntness. How refreshingly honest, Lord Thornton said with a laugh that was not quite kind. One must admire a woman who acknowledges her good fortune so plainly. Fortune indeed, Lady Pemberton murmured, though some might say the Duke was rather generous to overlook certain complications. Complications, Lady Thornton agreed, her tone dripping false sympathy. Though of course we all know poor Miss Hartwell, forgive me the Duchess, was innocent of any true wrongdoing, simply in the wrong place, at the wrong time. With the wrong man, Mrs. Clark added, though I suppose it worked out well enough in the end. Amelia felt her composure beginning to crack, the careful mask she wore slipping. But she forced her expression to remain serene, her voice steady. Indeed, one must always find the silver lining in misfortune. Quite philosophical, Lady Cordelia said coolly. One might almost think you planned the entire affair. How convenient that a scandal should lead to a dukedom. The implication was clear, that Amelia had orchestrated her own compromise to trap Sebastian into marriage. The unfairness of it, the casual cruelty, pressed against Amelia's chest like a weight. My mother raises an interesting point, Lord Pemberton said, leaning back in his chair. One wonders what the Duke sees in such an arrangement. After all, there is a difference between a wife of choice and a wife of necessity. Indeed, someone else murmured. Some marriages are simply necessary. Amelia reached for her wine-glass, her hand steady through sheer force of will. She would not break. Not here, not in front of these people who wanted nothing more than to see her crumble. Enough! Sebastian's voice cut through the table like a blade. He had been silent throughout the meal, his expression unreadable, but now he leaned forward, his grey eyes cold as winter. My marriage, he said softly, dangerously, is my concern, Lord Pemberton. Not yours, not anyone's at this table. Lord Pemberton flushed. I meant no offence, Your Grace, merely making conversation. Then converse about something else, Sebastian replied. His gaze swept the table. My wife has shown extraordinary grace in tolerating speculation about matters that are no one's business but our own. I suggest we all follow her example and remember our manners. The remainder of the dinner passed in strained politeness. Amelia barely tasted her food, acutely aware of Sebastian's presence at the head of the table, of the occasional glances he cast in her direction. When the ladies finally withdrew to the drawing-room, leaving the gentlemen to their port, Amelia excused herself quietly. Forgive me, Lady Ashford, I find I have a headache. Lady Cordelia waved her away dismissively. How convenient! Amelia fled to the conservatory, her refuge, her sanctuary. The glass walls were cold against her palms as she pressed her hands to them, staring out at the dark gardens beyond. Only then did she allow the tears to come, silent and hot against her cheeks. She had thought herself prepared for this, for the whispers, the judgments, the casual cruelty of people who had never faced ruin themselves. But hearing it spoken aloud, watching Sebastian sit silent while his own mother implied she was a schemer and a fortune hunter, it was too much. Amelia. She spun around to find Sebastian in the doorway, his cravat loosened, his expression stricken. I did not hear you enter, she said, quickly wiping her eyes. I should have stopped them sooner. He moved closer, his movements careful, as if approaching something fragile. What they said, what my mother implied, it was unconscionable. It was honest. Amelia replied, her voice breaking despite her efforts. That is what they all think. What you think, for all I know. This marriage is fake, remember? You remind me daily. Sebastian flinched as if she had struck him. I did not realize I was being cruel. Did you not? The anger surprised her, hot and sudden after weeks of careful composure. Every time you say those words, Sebastian, every time you remind me that this marriage means nothing, that I mean nothing, you are cruel. Perhaps not intentionally, but the effect is the same. You do not mean nothing, he said urgently. Then what do I mean? Amelia demanded. What am I to you, truly? A convenience? An obligation? A reminder of your own pain? Sebastian stopped, his face a study in conflict. He took a breath, then another. After Caroline betrayed me, I swore I would never allow anyone close enough to hurt me again. I built walls thick and high. And then you came into my life, and I told myself it would be easy to keep you at a distance. You were part of an arrangement, nothing more. And? Amelia whispered. And I was wrong. He admitted, his voice rough. You are kind. You are resilient. You endure my mother's cruelty with more dignity than I possess. You read in the conservatory and manage the household accounts and answer your father's worried letters with lies to spare him pain. You are— He stopped, shaking his head. But you are not her. You are not Caroline. And I have been punishing you for her sins. Amelia felt her heart crack open, dangerous and painful. What are you saying? I am saying I should have defended you sooner. I am saying I have been a coward. He reached out as he reached, if to touch her face, then let his hand fall. I am saying you deserve better than what I have given you. I knew what I was accepting, Amelia said quietly. I made this choice with open eyes. Then you are braver than I am. Sebastian's smile was sad, self-deprecating. Because I am terrified. Of what? But he did not answer. Instead, he stepped back, creating distance once more. You should rest. It has been a difficult evening. He left before she could respond, leaving Amelia alone with her tears and the terrible, fragile hope blooming in her chest despite every effort to crush it. The following days were careful, measured. Sebastian was attentive. Flowers appeared in her room, sent from the conservatory. He invited her to ride with him in the park. They took every meal together. To any observer, they might have seemed a devoted couple. But the walls remained. Every gesture of kindness was followed by retreat. Every moment of connection ended with Sebastian pulling away, his expression shuttered. We must maintain appearances, he would say. Or, this arrangement works well, does it not? And Amelia, despite her best intentions, felt herself withdrawing in turn. She answered his questions with politeness, but no warmth. She accepted his invitations with courtesy, but no enthusiasm. She was protecting herself the only way she knew how, by building her own walls, brick by painful brick. Then the letter came. Amelia was in the study, reviewing the weekly accounts when the Morning Post arrived. Among the usual correspondence was a letter bearing her father's seal. She opened it eagerly, hungry for news from home. My dearest daughter, your mother and I hope this letter finds you well. We are planning to spend the winter months in Bath, and would dearly love for you to join us. Your sisters miss you terribly, and I confess I long to see you myself. If the Duke can spare you for a month or two, please do come. The house we have let has plenty of room, and the company would do you good. Your loving father Amelia read the letter 3 times, each word a lifeline thrown across dark water. Bath, her family. Escape from this beautiful prison where she was slowly breaking apart. You look pleased. She turned to find Sebastian in the doorway, watching her with an expression she could not read. My father has invited me to Bath, she said, holding up the letter. My family will be there for the winter season. Something flickered across Sebastian's face. Surprise, perhaps, or disappointment. But it vanished quickly, replaced by careful neutrality. You wish to go? Yes, Amelia said. Then, more honestly, I need to go. I see. Sebastian entered the room, his movements stiff. When would you leave? As soon as it can be arranged, I think. Perhaps the end of the week. So soon? He was silent for a moment, staring at nothing. I suppose a separation would be convenient, Amelia interrupted, unable to help herself. Yes, Your Grace, I imagine it would be. His eyes snapped to hers, startled by her tone. You need not pretend concern, Amelia continued, rising from her chair. The words were spilling out now, weeks of careful control cracking like ice. You have made abundantly clear what this marriage is and is not. Perhaps it is time I stop pretending otherwise." "Pretending what?" Sebastian asked, his voice low. "That it does not hurt," Amelia said, and she was ashamed to hear her voice break. "Every single time you remind me this is fake, it hurts. Every time you pull away after a moment of genuine connection, it hurts. Every time you make me feel as if I am nothing more than an inconvenience you tolerate, it hurts." "Amelia, I am not finished." She took a shaking breath. "I accepted this marriage with no illusions, Sebastian. I knew it was a transaction. I knew you did not love me, would never love me. I knew I would be a wife in name only. But I did not know—" Her voice cracked. "I did not know that somewhere along the way I would forget to keep my heart uninvolved." The silence that followed was absolute. Sebastian stared at her as if she had struck him, his face pale. "Amelia," he said again, but she could not bear to hear whatever came next. "I will go to Bath," she said, forcing her voice to steady. "And perhaps the distance will help me remember what I should never have forgotten. That this marriage is exactly what you have always said it was. Fake." She walked past him, head high despite the tears streaming down her face. She did not look back. In the study, Sebastian stood frozen, his world tilting on its axis. Her words echoed in his mind, devastating in their honesty. "Somewhere along the way I forgot to keep my heart uninvolved." And with sudden, terrible clarity, he realized the truth he had been running from since the moment he met her. He had fallen in love with his own wife, the woman he reminded daily that their marriage meant nothing, the woman he pushed away every time she drew close, the woman he had been too much of a coward to admit mattered more than anything. And now she was leaving. Sebastian sank into the chair she had vacated, his head in his hands. "This marriage is fake," he whispered to the empty room. But the words that had once been armor now felt like the cruelest lie he had ever told. To her, to himself, to them both. Morning light filtered through the windows of Ashford House, illuminating the scene in the entrance hall like a stage set for heartbreak. 2 trunks sat ready by the door. Amelia stood beside them in a travelling dress of deep green, her bonnet already in place, her expression composed in a way that made Sebastian's chest ache. Lady Catherine Winters, Amelia's cousin, had arrived early to accompany her on the journey. She stood to the side, watching with knowing eyes that suggested she understood far more than anyone had said. Sebastian came down the stairs still wearing his dressing gown, an impropriety that would have scandalized anyone who saw. But he did not care. He had spent the entire night awake, wrestling with himself, with his fear, with the walls he had built so carefully over the years. And he had made his decision. "Amelia," he said. "Wait." She turned, her face carefully neutral. "There is nothing more to discuss, Your Grace." "Your Grace," he repeated, and the formality of it felt like a blade between his ribs. He descended the remaining stairs quickly, aware of the footman pretending not to listen, of Lady Catherine's sharp attention. "There is everything to discuss." "Sebastian," Amelia began. "Please." He crossed the marble floor to stand before her, close enough to see the shadows beneath her eyes that matched his own. "Just listen. For once, let me speak without armor, without pretense." She said nothing, but she did not leave. He took that as permission. "You are right," Sebastian said, his voice carrying in the vast space. "I have been a coward. I have been cruel. I have reminded you daily that our marriage is fake because—" He took a breath, forcing the words out. "Because I was terrified." "Terrified." Amelia's voice was barely a whisper. "Of what?" "Of you," he admitted. "Of how you make me feel. of wanting something real again after I swore I never would. A footman coughed quietly. Sebastian glanced around at their audience. Servants frozen in various poses of pretending to work, Lady Catherine watching with open interest. Let them hear. Let all of London hear, if it meant Amelia would stay. When Caroline betrayed me, Sebastian continued, I told myself I would never be vulnerable again. Never trust, never want. And when I married you, I believed I could maintain that distance. Keep you at arm's length. Remind myself constantly that it was an arrangement, nothing more. He laughed bitterly. I told myself I was protecting us both. You were protecting yourself. Amelia said quietly. Yes, he agreed. I was. But every wall I built, every time I said those words, this marriage is fake, I was not convincing you, Amelia. I was trying desperately to convince myself. Her eyes widened, something that might have been hope flickering in their depths. What are you saying? Sebastian took her hands in his, feeling them tremble. Or perhaps it was his own hands shaking. I am saying that every morning when I wake, I remind myself that this is not real, because if I admit it is, if I admit that I— The words caught in his throat, years of habit fighting against honesty. But he forced them out. If I admit that I have fallen in love with my own wife, then I risk everything. I risk my heart. I risk being hurt again. I risk— His voice cracked. I risk you not feeling the same. The silence that followed was infinite. Amelia stared at him, her expression unreadable, and Sebastian felt his heart fracture. Then she whispered, You love me. So completely it terrifies me. Sebastian confessed, the words tumbling out now like water through a broken dam. I love your strength, your dignity. The way you read in the conservatory by the window where the light is best. The way you manage the household accounts with a precision that puts my own steward to shame. I love how you write letters to your father, assuring him you are happy even when I have given you no reason to be. I love that you endured my mother's cruelty with more grace than I could ever possess. I love that you chose to protect your family even at cost to yourself. His hands tightened on hers. I love you, Amelia. And I have been a fool. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but her voice when she spoke was steady. You have been a fool. Sebastian's heart stopped. He had gambled everything and lost. But then Amelia continued, Because I have loved you for weeks, Sebastian, and every time you said this marriage was fake, I died a little inside. The world tilted. Sebastian stared at her, afraid to believe what he was hearing. You love me? You impossible, frustrating, emotionally distant man. Amelia said, laughing through her tears. Yes, I love you. Sebastian closed the distance between them, pulling her against him. She came willingly, her arms wrapping around his waist, her face pressed to his chest. He could feel her trembling, or perhaps that was still him. I am sorry, he whispered against her hair. I am so sorry for every time I hurt you, every time I made you feel unwanted, every time I pushed you away when all I wanted was to pull you closer. You are apologizing in front of the servants. Amelia murmured against his shirt. I do not care. Sebastian said fiercely. Let them hear. Let all of London hear. I love my wife, and I have been an idiot. Someone, possibly Lady Catherine, laughed softly. Sebastian pulled back just enough to see Amelia's face. Her eyes were red, her cheeks wet with tears, and she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Amelia Hartwell Blackwood, Duchess of Ashford. He said formally, Will you marry me? She blinked. We are already married, you absurd man. Then will you stay married to me? Sebastian amended. Truly this time, will you let me court you properly? Let me prove that this— He gestured between them. that this is the most real thing I have ever known." Amelia studied his face, and he forced himself to remain still under her scrutiny, letting her see everything, the fear, the hope, the desperate love he had tried so hard to deny. "Only if you promise," she said finally, "never to say, 'This marriage is fake,' again." "I promise," Sebastian vowed. "From this moment forward, this marriage is devastatingly, terrifyingly, perfectly real." "Then yes, Sebastian." Amelia smiled, radiant despite her tears. "I will stay." He kissed her then, there in the entrance hall with the servants watching, and Lady Catherine sighing dramatically, and the morning sun streaming through the tall windows. It was not their first kiss. They had kissed at their wedding, a perfunctory brush of lips that meant nothing. But this was different. This was a promise, a claim, a beginning. When they finally parted, breathless and laughing, Amelia rested her forehead against his. "The servants are staring." "Let them stare," Sebastian murmured. "I have wasted enough time caring what people think." "Your Grace," one of the footmen said tentatively. Shall I have the trunks returned to her Grace's chambers?" Sebastian looked at Amelia, eyebrow raised in question. She bit her lip, then said with admirable composure, "Actually, I believe my things should go to his Grace's chambers. We are married, after all." A collective intake of breath from the assembled staff. Lady Catherine laughed outright. Sebastian grinned, actually grinned, something Amelia realized she had never seen before. "You heard the Duchess, and someone inform Lady Cordelia that if she has any objections, she may direct them to me." The staff scattered to their tasks, whispers already beginning. Lady Catherine approached, kissing Amelia's cheek. "I am glad you are staying, cousin, though I am disappointed. I had rather looked forward to Bath." "Come visit us instead," Sebastian said easily. "Any family of Amelia's is welcome. Even if they witnessed your very public declaration," Catherine asked with a smile. "Especially then," Sebastian replied. "Someone needs to remind me of this moment when I am being difficult. When, not if," Amelia noted. "I am a work in progress," Sebastian admitted. Catherine departed soon after, promising to write. The house settled into its normal rhythm, though Amelia suspected the story of the Duke's declaration would be all over London by nightfall. She found she did not care. That evening, after a dinner where Sebastian barely took his eyes off her, they retreated to the library, the room where they had first truly spoken, where Amelia had first confronted him, where so much had begun without either of them realizing. A fire burned in the grate. Outside, snow had begun to fall, dusting London in white. Sebastian pulled Amelia down beside him on the sofa, keeping her hand clasped in his as if afraid she might disappear. "Tell me something," Amelia said softly. "When did you know that you loved me?" Sebastian was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Do you remember? The night after that horrible dinner party, when I found you in the conservatory?" "When I was crying," Amelia said. "Yes." His voice was rough with memory. "You turned to me, and your eyes were so full of pain, pain that I had caused, that I had allowed, and you said, 'This marriage is fake, remember? You remind me daily.' And I realized that I had been saying those words like a talisman, trying to protect myself. But all I had done was hurt the one person who had never wanted anything from me except to be treated as human." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "That was when I knew, when I realized I would rather face every fear I have than continue causing you pain. But I was too much of a coward to admit it, even to myself, not until you decided to leave." "And nearly did," Amelia pointed out. "Do not remind me." Sebastian shuddered. When I saw those trunks this morning, my heart stopped. I thought I had lost you, that I had pushed you away one too many times. You almost had? Amelia admitted. But then you came down those stairs in your dressing gown, completely improper, by the way, and you looked so desperate, so completely unlike the cold Duke of Ashford, that I had to listen. Thank God you did. He pulled her closer until she was tucked against his side, her head on his shoulder. I do not deserve you, Amelia, but I swear I will spend the rest of our lives trying to be worthy of you. You are worthy, Amelia said firmly. Flawed, yes. Emotionally guarded, absolutely. But worthy. You offered me salvation when I had none, Sebastian. You gave me safety, even if you could not give me your heart right away. You have it now, Sebastian promised. Completely, irrevocably, terrifyingly. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire dance. The snow outside grew heavier, blanketing the city in hush and magic. Sebastian? Amelia said eventually. This morning, you said you had my things moved to your chambers. He tensed slightly. I did. I realize now that was presumptuous. When did you do it? Amelia interrupted. Yesterday afternoon. Sebastian admitted. After you told me you were leaving. I spent the night in torment, and at some point around dawn, I called for my valet and told him to have your belongings moved. If you had left anyway, I suppose I would have looked the fool, but I had to believe. His voice caught. I had to believe you might stay, that I might find the courage to ask you to. Amelia lifted her head to look at him. You moved my things before you even knew what you were going to say? Hope before reason, Sebastian said with a self-deprecating smile. Not my usual method. I like it, Amelia decided. She kissed him softly. It suits you. When they finally climbed the stairs to their shared chambers, truly shared now, not divided by walls and fear, Amelia paused at the door. Sebastian waited, patient, letting her set the pace. Are you certain? He asked quietly. We need not, that is, we can wait, until you are ready, until you are certain of me. Amelia took his hand, squeezing gently. I am certain, Sebastian. I have been certain for weeks. I was simply waiting for you to catch up. He laughed, the sound warm and free in a way she had never heard before. Then I suppose I should stop wasting time. Inside the room was warm and lit by firelight. Someone, probably the ever-efficient staff, had prepared everything beautifully. Amelia's books were on the table by the window. Her brush and mirror sat on the vanity. Small signs that she belonged here, in this space, in this life, in his life. Sebastian came up behind her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. I have one more confession to make. Another one? Amelia leaned back against him. The conservatory, Sebastian said. I have been going there every morning since you discovered it. Not because it was my habit before, it was not, but because I knew I might see you there. And even when I was too much of a fool to admit what I felt, I wanted those moments, those quiet conversations, your presence. Amelia turned in his arms, looking up at him. You realize this means you are far more sentimental than you pretend. Only with you, Sebastian said. You seem to bring out sides of me I did not know existed. Good, Amelia said. I rather like those sides. He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Amelia felt the last of her defenses dissolve. This was real. He was real. The love between them, hard-won and fragile and fierce, was real. When they finally parted, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. No more walls, he promised. No more pretending, Amelia agreed. No more reminding you that this marriage is fake. Sebastian added with a smile. Because it is not, Amelia finished. Because it is devastatingly real, Sebastian corrected. The realest thing I have ever known. Outside, snow continued to fall over London, transforming the city into something clean and new. Inside Ashford House, in chambers that were finally shared without reservation or fear, a duke and his duchess discovered what it meant to truly be married. Not because society demanded it, not because scandal required it, but because two damaged people had found in each other something neither had expected: healing, hope, and a love that had been real all along, waiting patiently for them both to be brave enough to claim it. The fire burned low as they talked and touched and learned the landscape of each other's hearts. And when they finally slept, wrapped together in the vast bed that had once been his alone, Sebastian whispered against Amelia's hair, "Thank you." "For what?" she murmured, already half asleep. "For not giving up on me, for staying, for loving me despite every reason not to." Amelia pressed a kiss to his chest, right above his heart. "Always, Sebastian, always." Outside, winter held London in its grip, but inside Ashford House, spring had finally irrevocably come.